A while ago, I made a video on how the Philadelphia 76ers were ruined by Elton Brand, but today, I want to do a bit of a different video, and that video is what the 76ers should do next so they can set themselves up for success. But before we do get started, please like the video if you guys did enjoy today's videos. It really helps out the channel. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, as I'm trying to reach 100 subscribers, and a good percentage of you guys watching these videos are not subscribed. So if you guys are a fan of the NFL or the NBA and you like this type of content, subscribe, as there's videos like this on the channel and there will be more in the future. I'm trying to reach 100 subscribers, as I said before, and when we do hit 100 subs, I will be doing a Q&A. So if you guys are new, you like the content and you want to learn more about me, subscribe. So with all that being said, let's get this thing started. Let's start things off with the roster, and the first player I want to talk about is Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid is a good post scorer, finisher at the rim, defender, and he's also a good rebounder. However, in the regular season this year, he did struggle a little bit and his stats took a hit, as he averaged just 23 points per game, 12 rebounds per game, 1.3 blocks per game, shooting 48% from the field. Joel Embiid, however, I still think is one of the best centers in the NBA. He's a great two-way big, and he's by far the best best player on this team. However, injuries do kind of affect him, and I could see the guy getting traded, but more on that later. Next up, we got Ben Simmons, who's definitely the second best player on this team. Personally, I think Ben Simmons isn't that bad of a player. He's very versatile, as he can play all 5 positions on the court. He's a good passer, playmaker, finisher, rebounder, and defender. In the regular season, he averaged 16 points per game, 8 assists per game, 2 steals per game, 8 rebounds per game, shooting 58% from the field. I think Ben Simmons should really develop a jump shot. It would really help the 76ers. However, even without a jump shot, Ben Simmons is still a very good player, and he's one of the best players in the NBA. And the next player I want to talk about is Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris, if you ask me, is not that bad of a player under normal circumstances. The guy is a fringe all-star, well, near all-star player, and he's a good scorer, post scorer, mid-range shooter, three-point shooter, and he's also a solid rebounder. However, the entire year he played out of position, and he's overpaid a lot. However, in the regular season, he was slightly disappointing from 3. However, he did average 20 points per game, 3 assists per game, and 7 rebounds per game, shooting 47% from the field. However, in the playoffs, he was very bad, as he averaged just 16 points per game, and he shot 38% from the field and 13% from 3. And while Tobias Harris did have a down year, I do think Tobias Harris normally is not that bad of a player, and I do think the guy, when he is a good three-point shooter, would be a nice fit on this roster. However, he is overpaid. But moving on, we got Al Horford, who's also massively overpaid and is a very bad fit on the team. He had very bad stats. Well, for him, he had bad stats of just 12 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, shooting 45% from the field and 35% from 3. Overall, he's not that bad of a player when he isn't on a team that's a bad fit for him, as he's a nice defender and he can also score the ball too. And in the playoffs, he did just average 7 points per game, which really speaks to just how much of a down year Al Horford really had. However, Al Horford is still not that bad of a player under normal circumstances. Next up, we got Josh Richardson, who's a nice two-way wing, as he averaged 14 points per game, 3 assists per game, and he shot 43% from the field and 34% from 3. Under normal circumstances, I do think Josh Richardson, well, I think he's not that bad of a three-point shooter. However, he was a little bit disappointing, and he was kind of disappointing offensively this year overall. However, he's still not that bad of a player. Next up, we got Shake Milton. Shake Milton kind of had a breakout season at the end of the year, and I do think Philadelphia should try and develop him. He's a good offensive guard who can shoot, score, and he's also a fine playmaker. As in the regular season, he averaged 9 points per game, 3 assists per game, shooting 48% from the field and 43% from 3. Next up, we got Matisse Thybulle, who's a good young player, who's a great defensive player, and he's also, well, he's kind of inconsistent offensively. However, once he does become more consistent offensively, I do think this guy will become a pretty good player in the future. The guy averaged just 5 points per game. However, he did average 1.4 steals per game, and he shot 36% from 3. Next up, the final player I want to talk about is Furkan Korkmaz. Furkan Korkmaz is really not that bad of a player, and I do think Philadelphia should try and keep him because of his ability to shoot. He's a nice scoring wing who averaged 10 points per game, and he shot 40% from 3. And with all of that being said, Now, what are the issues with this Philadelphia team? And the issues with the 76ers is that, first off, their roster is a very bad fit. Tobias Harris is too slow to play small forward as his full-time position, and that really doesn't help him at all as he gets burned a lot on defense. Al Horford also is a bad fit on this team as he cannot play power forward in the modern NBA. He's too slow and he has a bad jump shot for power forward, and he should stick to playing center. And if he was to play center on this team, he'd have to come off the bench because obviously they got Joel Embiid. Not only that, but the spacing on this team is terrible, and that really doesn't help when you got a guy who's a liability from anywhere outside the paint when it comes to scoring. And Joel Embiid, while he isn't afraid to take threes and he can occasionally hit them, he's not great from three. Anyways, that really just shows why Ben and Joel did not have a great, did not have great years. And because of that, I want to talk about whether Ben and Joel Embiid can play together. And to answer that question, I do think they can. However, Ben Simmons would probably have to play small forward or power forward to maximize the spacing on this team. And really, they both need spacing because they are bad shooters. Not only that, but I do think that there is a good chance that Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid get traded. And now, as for who I think should be traded, I think it should be Joel Embiid. However, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Ben Simmons. The reason is because, well, first off, Daryl Morey, who just became the president of basketball operations, is a modern-day basketball junkie. I think he'll trade Joel Embiid because, first off, Joel Embiid is close to hitting his peak. Not only that, but he is injury prone. Plus, add that on with the fact that Daryl Morey is a modern day basketball junkie. And that's going to bring us into the trades. So let's get started with the trades. This first trade I have is one that's heavily rumored. And this one is the 76ers would get Buddy Hield and the Kings would get Al Horford and 2 first-round picks. There's heavy rumors of this happening, as I said before. I think Buddy would be perfect for the Philadelphia 76ers. He's one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA, and he'd immediately improve the floor spacing on this team. Now, the Kings, they wanted Al Horford in the 2019 offseason, and while I don't think while they will get his massive contract, they will also get 2 first-round picks, so that is always nice. Now, I could see the Kings maybe wanting 3 first-round picks because, well, they're taking on Al Horford's contract, so it's really bad. But I do think 2 or 3 would get this deal done. And I do think this trade is fine for both sides, as the Kings, while they do get his Al Horford's massive contract, he's not a terrible player when he's under the right circumstances anyways. The 76ers would probably run a lineup of Ben Simmons, Buddy Hield, Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid, while the Kings would run a lineup of De'Aaron Fox, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Harrison Barnes, Marvin Bagley, and Al Horford. Overall, the trade is fine for both sides. The Kings can finally trade Buddy Hield as it's clear he doesn't really want to be there, and the 76ers would get a perimeter shot creating guard who can immediately improve the spacing on this team. The second one I suggested in my Chris Paul trades video, so as you guys can guess, the 76ers would get Chris Paul, the Thunder would get Josh Richardson, Al Horford, and 3 first-round picks. And personally, I do think this trade is okay for both sides. Now, I did modify the trade a little bit by adding 1 more first to Thunder, because the Thunder will take on Al Horford's massive contract, and like the Kings, I do think they would probably want something like 2 or 3 first-round picks because they have to take on his contract. Plus, Chris Paul was very valuable to that team. However, I do think it should get the deal done. The Thunder would get more assets, and the 76ers would get Chris Paul, who can shoot, score, create off the dribble, defend, pass, and play make, and he'd be a great leader for the 76ers team, and the 76ers really need a good leader. The 76ers would probably run a lineup of Chris Paul, Shake Milton, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid. And overall, I do think it's a fine trade for both sides. This third trade, well, I don't think it's very, very likely, but I do think maybe it could happen. I decided to include it anyways, because since there's heavy rumors of it happening, but anyways. The third trade is the 76ers would get James Harden, while the Rockets would get Joel Embiid, Josh Richardson, and 4 first-round picks. Now, as I said, this might happen. It's not very likely, and I seriously doubt it does happen, but I do think James Harden would be fantastic for this team because, well, first off, he's James Harden, and not only that, he's a fantastic shot creator, shooter, scorer, playmaker, and passer. And they lose Joel Embiid. However, this isn't too bad for both sides, as the 76ers would immediately get improved floor spacing. Not only that, but the Rockets, they can kind of kickstart a rebuild, and Joel Embiid would be a nice star on this team, and they'd also get revived draft capital, as they get for 4 first-round picks in this deal, along with Josh Richardson, who's a nice role player to have. The 76ers would run a lineup of James Harden, Shake Milton, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, and Al Horford. Well, that's what I think they could run in real life if this trade were to go down. I think this trade is okay for both sides, because the 76ers would get a nice shot creating guard who would immediately improve the floor spacing on this team, and the Rockets could kickstart a rebuild and get revitalized draft capital along with a nice star. The fourth trade I have is one that could also possibly happen. It involves the Golden State Warriors, and that's the 76ers would get Andrew Wiggins, the number 2 overall pick, along with 2 more first round picks, with the Warriors getting Joel Embiid. This trade would be nice for both sides, as the 76ers would get the number 2 overall pick, which they can use for shot creating guard. Now, as for who that could be, I'm not totally sure. They can decide on that, I guess, if they were to do this trade. And Wiggins would also be a nice 6th man. Plus, they'd also get 2 first-round picks, and that's a nice return for Joel Embiid. The Warriors, on the other hand, would get another consistent scoring option on this team, and would probably become favorites in the Western Conference, as they'd have a big 3 of Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Joel Embiid. And Joel Embiid would have immediately improved floor spacing, as he has 2 of the best shooters of all time. Plus, there's a good chance to insert a small forward who could probably shoot the ball. But anyways, moving on to the 5th and final trade, it's the Trailblazers would get Joel Embiid, Josh Richardson, a 2nd round pick, while the 76ers would get CJ McCollum, Yusuf Nurkic, and 2 first round picks. I suggested this in my Portland video, what's next video, so I'll put a card above that I'll put a card above it if I do remember, so I'll try to keep this short. But essentially, Philadelphia gets another shot creating guard and a solid center, along with 2 first round picks, which is definitely pretty nice for Joel Embiid. Portland, on the other hand, would get a borderline superstar player, Not only that, but they also got a 2nd round pick. Plus, they also got Josh Richardson, who's a nice player to have. The 76ers, I think this is a nice trade for them. They may ask for another first round pick, but I do think 2 or 3 could definitely cap this trade. But with all that being said, what do the 76ers really need to do? For me, I think Philly really needs to get a shot creating guard to help improve the floor spacing on this team, and that guard could also act as a secondary ball handler to make the plays for the offense. And they should try and finesse the team into getting Al Horford or Tobias Harris's contracts. Now, that would be really hard because their contracts are very bad, and I seriously doubt any team wants to take on those contracts. But I do think if they do trade for someone like Chris Paul or Buddy Hield, Al Horford would probably have to be moved because of how big their contracts are. However, and while they would have to give up a couple first round picks, I do not think it would be I think it would be worth it, as they would get off those contracts. But with all that being said, that's going to be the end of today's video. If you guys did enjoy today's video, please like the video, as it really helps out the channel. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, as I'm trying to reach 100 subscribers, and it would be greatly appreciated if we could reach that goal. If you guys like this type of content, click the subscribe button, as there's videos like this on the channel, and there will be more in the future. And I'm trying to reach 100 subscribers, as I said before, and I will be doing a Q&A when we reach 100. So if you guys want to learn more about me and you like this type of content, click the subscribe button if you guys haven't already. And with all that being said, I'm out, you guys.